Hey, my name's Assemblyman Kevin Byrne. Traveled up all the way from Putnam County in northern Westchester to be here today. And just so you know, this is really kind of a prop, right? Obviously, it's not hooked up to a speaker, but it's so we can track all the comments and testimony today for our report, for the video. I'm one of the co-chairs of this task force, and I want to thank you for opening your doors here, allowing me and my fellow colleagues from the Republican Assembly Conference to be here to listen to your concerns. My fellow co-chair, Phil Palmisano, and I have been traveling the state of New York, listening to stakeholders about how we can do a better job to do a better job for our infrastructure, our transportation system. There's a lot of unmet needs. A report from the Comptroller's office talked about $70 billion worth of cost for deficient bridges. We've had a report from CNBC 2018 talking about how New York was ranked as the 7th worst state in the country for infrastructure. So again, there's a lot of unmet needs, and if we want to tackle this head on, we got to listen to all the stakeholders. So I want to thank you for being here today, and I want to thank my colleagues hosting this, Assemblyman Ray Walter, David DiPietro, and Mike Norris. And I'm going to pass this mic along down the table here so everyone can say a few words. And just, again, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Kevin, and thanks for being here, for you and Phil for hosting the forum. Again, my name is Assemblyman Ray Walter, and welcome to the 146th District, my home turf here at ECC North. But, you know, infrastructure obviously is an important function of government, and making sure we make the proper investments to maintain that infrastructure has multiple benefits. Number one, it's a quality of life issue for our residents. Number two, it's a safety issue. We want to make sure that people traveling our roadways and bridges and water infrastructure, that they're safe. And number three, it's an economic development issue. So we need to make sure that goods and services and people engaging in economic activity can get there, get where they're going, and purchase and deliver goods on time and in a safe and efficient manner. So what you guys do is extremely important. We need to make sure that we're doing everything we can in New York State to invest in that. So I really appreciate Phil and Kevin traveling the state, shining a spotlight on this, gathering information so we can go back and do our job in Albany next year, hopefully. And I'll pass it along. And I think what we'll do, Phil, and I don't want to step on your toes here, buddy, but rather than introduce speakers and everything, why don't we just pass it all the way around the circle here, if that's okay? Or no, you don't want to do that. Yeah, he doesn't want to do that. Did you see that? He does not want to do that. All right, thanks.
Thanks, Ray. Hi, I'm Assemblyman David DiPietro. Thanks for coming. And I do want to thank Kevin and Phil for traveling the state. They've taken a lot of time this summer and this fall to listen to the needs of everyone. I would also like to say that this is a huge thing for us. We really appreciate it. We need to get our handle on the infrastructure in New York State. We all know that we have a lot of crumbling infrastructure. The state has not put enough resources into it over the last few years, and we're trying to change that. Also in my district, besides quality of life, we've got a lot of farms and agriculture. And as you know, the equipment that they're coming out with now are a lot bigger, a lot heavier, and they tear up the roads a lot quicker. And we in the rural areas sometimes don't have the resources to get those roads back to the standard they need to be able to have that equipment. I see that a lot in my district. So I'm hoping that we can come up with some good solutions here and to help that out in the future. So thank you.
Thank you, David. I also want to thank Ray, David, and Mike for hosting this forum, and want to say thank you to all of you for coming out. This is our 6th of 8 forums around the state. They've been very informative, very helpful, and the whole purpose of it is to listen and then to take what you tell us and be proactive about it. What we don't want to be doing is being reactive to a tragedy that happens. We need to be proactive to stop tragedies from happening. As Ray said, this is a public safety issue. This is an economic development issue. This is a tax issue for our taxpayers, for our residents. This should not be a partisan issue. This is not a Republican or Democratic issue. This is a common sense issue. And with the unmet needs, billions of dollars in unmet need, both at the state system, but on the local infrastructure, certainly we've heard a lot about the need to make sure we're making a better commitment to our local infrastructure. We hear that wherever we go through programs like the CHIPS program. When 87% of the roads in our state are owned and maintained by our local municipalities, 52% of the 18,000 bridges are owned and maintained by our local municipalities, and 48% of the miles are driven on local roads. So those types of issues are things we're looking to put, and what we're going to do from the meetings with you and the stakeholders around the state is we're going to put together a report, and we're going to share it with the governor, we're going to share it with our legislative colleagues, and we'll put it out so it'll be available to you as well if you're interested in getting copies of those reports. Because we want to be proactive, we'll come up with some solid solutions, ideas. We know money is a big part of it, but there's also regulatory issues, and those are some things we might ask you about, and get ideas on those types of things and legislation things we can do, and we'll bring up some of that today. So, and yes, Ray, we can pass the microphone around. That's not a problem. I have no problem with that. And we will pass it around because it's more of a round table, and then just kind of share your thoughts on where the needs are, the issues are, and we can if people want to, we'll have some questions and we can kind of go back and forth and have some discussion and a round table. That works perfectly. Maybe identify as you're speaking so we can keep track. That would be helpful. So thanks again for coming out. I can't tell you how important your input and your feedback is for us on this process. So thank you very much for coming out. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank Kevin and Phil for being here today, along with my two colleagues, Ray and Dave DiPietro. My name is Mike Norris. I'm the Assemblyman representing parts of Niagara, Erie, and Orleans County. In my past history before being elected to the Assembly, I was a town attorney. I worked with many of the highway superintendents, our public officials, our law enforcement officials, and I can tell you it is so critically important what the citizens expect, and that is strong infrastructure for our communities. When you talk to individuals, whether it be at the door or at community events, that is the expectation of citizens, that they are provided very good infrastructure. A city clerk once told me a long time ago, before you even get on the road in the morning, you make sure you brush your teeth, you use the water. Sewers, you have to go to the restroom. You get on the road, you go over a bridge. All things that you interact with every single day. We had to invest. It's about jobs. It's about economic development. It's about safety. I'm very glad to be here today with my colleagues. This is a very important issue, and I look forward to hearing from you, the experts in the field, about how we can do a much better job improving our infrastructure here in the city of New York. Thank you. Over to the Sheriff.
Sure, absolutely.
Sheriff.
Thank you, Erie County Sheriff Tim Howard, if you didn't guess from the uniform. First, let me thank the members of the Assembly for the interest you're showing. I think, at least I feel too much from Albany that they think they know what we need, and there's not enough coming out and asking what we need, or the involvement of here are the experts that know. So well done for that. I think the only additional comment I can make is to point out what you no doubt already know, and that's the closing of a road, even temporarily, is a temporary, at least extension of the availability of emergency services. And there are people that would say that police response time is not critical. I can tell you one case, one set of circumstances, and that's with the drug problems that we're having, the overdoses, and the fact that many of the law enforcement officers carry an antidote with them in the form of Narcan, that even seconds delay of administering that clearly makes a difference between life and death. And I guess lastly, that if anyone was to think in the future, would there be more roads or less roads? And I continue to see rural roads that are closed and never reopened. So it certainly seems to be a contradiction of what common sense would say, that if we once needed a road and we no longer need a road, it's a suggestion that there's something wrong with our state, that we have less needs now than before. Clearly not the case.
Hello, my name is Patrick Lucy. I am the Highway Superintendent of the Town of Amherst. The Town of Amherst being one of the largest towns in upstate New York. We have over 300 lane miles that I am responsible to maintain, whether it's paving, salt and ice. As the sheriff just said, prior to that, for 29 years I was a police officer with the Town of Amherst, so I'm very well aware of how important roads are and the safety to respond to 2 incidents. During my course of 11 plus years, I was in the traffic accident investigation unit where I investigated accidents. I'm a reconstructionist, went through the whole deal, learned what caused accidents, why, sometimes roads, sometimes people, most of the times people. Obviously, if people always drove the way they're supposed to, we would have very few accidents. But road conditions also do play a part in it. So when I got into this job, into this highway superintendent's, the duties, one of my priorities was to continue to keep our roads safe. Amherst, we're pretty fortunate where we can sort of keep even keel with what we need. Very thankful to the state for the money that we've received through CHIPS and the other various monetary ways that we get money. I went to Albany for the first time in the first weekend of March, I believe, where there was a freak snowstorm, and I never got to see what went on there as far as when we had all the highway superintendents, we were going to fight for the roads money, unfortunately. So I'm going to try to go back next year, but I'm very interested in this and, you know, really to plead my case because there are issues. Even in Amherst, we do have road issues.
Just before you go into this, I just have a couple quick questions. First is Sheriff, public safety. What are some of the things you think from the state what we can do to help you as far as the issues you might have on the road? Is, you know, whether it's move over or the move over law, or is it more we can do on education or enforcement side? What do you think we could do a better job on from the state perspective to help your relative to infrastructure for delivering help improving public safety?
Well, I think just first the recognition that response time is significant, and I think you know that. It's others that are suggesting that it's not. To the move over law, I would just point out one thing, particularly on the interstates, is that I frequently would see a police car that's made a traffic stop in the left lane, and as people are approaching, they're all moving into the left lane, assuming that the stop is on the right. I don't know that you can do anything about that, but I do know that I'm not completely convinced that that's made things safer, but it's like saying it was a great attempt and time will tell. I think the only thing I'd say is, again, thank you for what you're doing, because addressing the issues and, again, trying to repair roads before they have to be closed so we can deal with single lane closures instead of an entire road makes a huge difference.
Sheriff, just to kind of follow up on one thing we were saying about public safety, your note about the delayed response, certainly with giving naloxone to save a life, I think is a great example. But the need to invest greater, also for any first responders. I mean, even early defibrillation saves lives with AEDs if you got a cardiac arrest, for if it's in an ambulance. And I think your point's really well taken. I think either you or this person to your right mentioned other areas of, like, whether it's accidents that could cause harm to infrastructure. Do you have the tools? Is there anything the state can do better to help combat things like distracted driving from a public safety perspective? I know, like, you hear a lot of things about texting and driving, and that may not be like the core subject of today, but that's come up in a couple times when we were in Long Island. And if law enforcement has the tools to help identify when someone is texting and driving.
I think the communication industries worked cooperatively with law enforcement at public safety fairs. If anyone here does text and drive and has never taken the little the video that with the special glasses that you put on, my age doesn't work with this new technology, but the virtual reality glasses, so that you're using a phone while driving, is very realistic, and guarantee if you participate in that, you will not text and drive. You'll be totally convinced you cannot do that safely.
Yeah, they bring that up to Albany once in a while too. So thank you. That's something I want to follow up on. Appreciate it.
Pat, I got a couple questions for you.
Yep.
And this question probably be geared a lot more towards you and Garrett. Relative to local infrastructure, and you brought up the point about the rallies in Albany. They've been something. You have about 700 highway superintendents that come to Albany each and every year to advocate for Local Roads Matter campaign and make sure we're trying to put a focus on providing local infrastructure. We've had some success with that over the years. If you look at where we were 6 years ago between the Pave New York and Extreme Winter Recovery the initial CHIPS increase we had, every municipality in state funding compared to where they were 6 years ago is receiving about 50 to 55% more, but it's not enough. It's not nearly enough. There's dramatic need up there. So relative to the CHIPS program, one of the things we've heard in some areas, especially like in the southern tier, they said, you know, the CHIPS program, the formula, the way it works, sometimes there's certain things that might not qualify for work that might be beneficial for a municipality to do. And also, in one area they mentioned the chip sealing, but we've heard that it does qualify for CHIPS funding. But is there any type of work, or is there anything you would recommend in the CHIPS formula or relative to work that can be done to provide more flexibility to municipalities? Would that be something that would be helpful and looked on favorably upon? Because I know there's usually a 10-year useful life on those types of funds.
Yeah, well, and we use pretty much all our money every year. You know, we have a very progressive paving program within our town. We have our own paving machine that CHIPS did pay for part of a couple of years ago, that we could use some of that money toward the equipment. It helped tremendously. And we're still paving roads today. We had the crews out today paving roads in late October, and we're a few more courts we're going to try to get before the beginning of November, where then I have to move into other jobs, leaf pickups, stuff of that nature. But we're very aggressive. We start in April, weather permitting, and we work straight through. So pretty much the money, the way it's distributed now, and what the causes are for, what we can use it for, suits our needs. But we primarily pave roads, we mill them, and scarify some of them, you know, if they qualify. So it does cover pretty much all of our needs as to what we do. The one thing that we're coming across a lot is the drainage in the roads, how it's deteriorating. We have to replace a lot of these drains that are just rotting away. A lot of them were metal put back in the day 40, 50 years ago, where we're now replacing with HDPE piping, which will last a lot longer, but we have to address it now. So these are things that eat up a lot of this money. Obviously, curbing. Our town is getting old. It's 200 years old this year. So it is getting old. It is showing wear and tear. And we're just trying, again, we're doing well with the money that the town gives me, and again, I get from the state, that it does keep us busy. We do most of the work we can. We do contract some of it out. But for the most part, 90% it's done in-house, and we really get a good bang for the buck.
A couple other questions, if I could, real quick.
Yep.
Relative to the CHIPS program, sometimes we've heard one of the comments come up. We have legislation in our conference that would increase the threshold from $250,000 to $500,000 before you'd have to go up to a competitive bid, because that would allow a lot of highway departments to do that work in-house. Would that provide more flexibility to highway departments if they were to increase that threshold, you know, at the current $250,000 level before us to go to competitive bid to a $500,000 or higher? Do you think that's something that would be looked upon favorably?
I think it would be, absolutely, yes.
And the other question I have is, do you have a lot of culverts in the town, or are you more just bridges? Because we've got a lot of concerns brought up about culverts in the communities and how they're becoming a challenge as well.
We're not responsible for too many bridges, really. There is one going through the UB campus as we speak that's planned, and we already have funds secured to have that replaced. Culverts are a bigger deal. We have some problems with those here and there. Some of them we've had replaced in-house, and other ones we're going to have to bid out the work because they're just too big. But we're fortunate that we don't have a lot of those, or the bridges that we do have are under another jurisdiction, maybe county or New York State. And there are issues, don't get me wrong, but at least for what the town is responsible for, we're pretty fortunate that we don't have those heavy costs.
And what has been your experience? Have you had any experience with the Bridge New York program as far as application process? We've heard some of the forums we went to. We heard that sometimes that they made some changes to the paperwork that made a little bit more burdensome, especially on some local municipalities. But then we also heard say they helped give better applications. You know, we heard that last night. But you know, with the culverts, they qualify for Bridge New York funding if they meet certain thresholds. Is that something that you've had experience with? And do you think if there's ways we can provide funding? Because what other ideas come out of these hearings is maybe create like a CHIPS-like formula specifically for culverts or bridges, just another way to provide direct assistance to municipalities to fix some of the culverts and things like that. Are any of those things that you've experienced?
Again, the bridge in New York and what you're talking about, the application, we have an engineering department within the town of Amherst that handles all that, really. They have qualified people who are certified to inspect the bridges, or they have somebody come in and do it. So they actually do apply for these sort of projects and stuff like that. If I determine, or, if I ask them, they will handle that. But I think that, actually having the culverts separate from a bridge or something, or have a separate type of application maybe for them, that would assist us, that would be helpful. Because, like I said, in the town of Amherst, we have more culverts than we really do bridges. And we have more problems with our culverts, I know, than bridges itself.
My name's Tom Matursky. I'm representing the Williamsville Central School District. I'm Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Management Services. My management services piece also includes our facilities, keeping up our facilities, our capital projects, as well as our school bus transportation. I can tell you that the beginning of this school year, with all the project work going on our roads around here, has been a bit of a challenge. However, we realize that a little challenge in the beginning is made up with better roads and better transportation in the end. So we've worked through that, and we're happy to be here, and whatever information I can provide to you, I'm very willing to do so.
Good evening. My name is James Dussing. I'm the highway superintendent, Pat's counterpart over in the town of Clarence. We're Amherst's little brother across Transit Road. We're about a quarter of the size, but we deal with a lot of the same things that a lot of these gentlemen in the room do. I'm also a 20-year volunteer fireman. I have delivered doses of Narcan to people through the EMS at the Clarence Fire Company. So I realize how critical, the roads are from that public safety standpoint, as well as, what I see every day and get calls about every night and emails about every weekend. It never stops. And, to a certain degree, no matter how much money we got, there would always be additional requests. So we have to be realistic about the amounts of money and our specific needs. And we also have to realize, and I think we all realize, so that's why we go to Albany once a year, that we are competing. We have to be realistic about the fact that we're competing with everybody else. Everybody else is coming to Albany, so we have to be realistic about those amounts. But I can honestly say that every year it comes down to the fact where Paul can attest to the fact that we have that meeting in my office, and I say, okay, that's it. We're at the end of the road, no pun intended. And that's when we get to the point in the season where we are now, where we really have to cut the road work off and say we did the best we could and switch gears like Pat was talking about and start picking up leaves and stuff like that. And we just have to leave a little bit of money in the fund to get us through January, and then we're restocked in January with the new budget year. But it's very important. All these state programs that we have a lot of success with, CHIPS and Bridge New York, any additional revenue we can get, especially through CHIPS, because it's a reimbursement program. That every dollar is going into the road. You have to spend it before you can get it back. So they're great programs. The only thing I can do is speak to increase those levels and work with, the legislators and all the different departments to enhance our capabilities to do that. So.
Jim,
Yeah.
do you have any unique issues since, Clarence is a very suburban town, and it's also a very rural town.
Sure is, yeah.
So, you do a lot of oil and chip, and you have to do a lot of milling, paving, and everything too. Do you have anything unique? And you got a ton of bridges, I know. When I was in the county legislature, we did so many bridges and culverts in Clarence. I want to take credit for that.
Right. No problem.
But it does seem like that you have some unique challenges maybe then?
Well, the biggest challenge, and I think I could speak for probably North Amherst as well, we are flat. Even though there's major bodies of, major creeks. Tonawanda Creek runs on our northern border between myself and Lockport. We have Gott Creek, Ransom Creek, Black Creek. We have creeks all over the place that are tributaries to Tonawanda Creek, and it goes onto the canal and onto the lake. But we're flat, so culverts are huge. We have culverts. There isn't a road in our town that doesn't have multiple culverts on it. So in addition to the road work during the summer, we have our own forces out replacing culverts on a daily basis. There's we call it the grade out crew, the pipe crew, and we have also another crew almost all year long working in the field ditches to restore, what the farmers had cleaned out 100 years ago. Things have changed. That land is not being worked or farmed as much. Big homes are going up. Small homes, homesteads. And basically the drainage system that these sellers, were able to put together with dynamite, horses and buggies, and or not horses and buggies, but horse and pulling stumps and all those things. They don't do that anymore. So we have to get back in there and reestablish this hundreds of miles of series of ditches, and we do, on a good year, 8 or 9 miles of off-road restoration, probably a couple miles of on-road restoration, and we are swapping out culvert pipes every day. The ones that we can't handle, like Pat said, in the town of Amherst, we do sub some out. It's just a combination of budget money, bond money, whatever we can scrap together, and we've had great results. But time will tell when the water comes up. We'll see what happens. But by far the biggest challenge we have in the town of Clarence is just the flat, vast areas that we have.
James, a couple of quick questions, kind of similar to what I asked Pat, relative to the CHIPS formula reimbursement. Do you think the criteria to get the reimbursement is fine and adequate the way that where it is, or do you think there could be some changes made that might make it more flexible for municipalities like yourself, or maybe smaller rural municipalities that might have a challenge and could use that money to do certain things that might not meet the criteria as it is now?
As far as the processes we use, I don't have an issue with the 10-year lifespan. I mean, we try when we not necessarily a chip seal, but when we do a mill and overlay or some kind of construction, but we want to see at least 15 years out of that road before we have to go back, and that's not including striping or anything like that. We want to see 15 years. So the 10-year rule of thumb has no impact on my town, and that's all I can speak for. I would like to see, some of the other extreme. We have CHIPS. Obviously, you're familiar with extreme winter recovery, and Pave New York. Okay, all excellent sources of money, and the latter two not being permanent. I believe the Pave New York and extreme winter recovery. Obviously, once we get used to having those in the budget years, we start to depend on that and start to look at it. I'd like to see those become permanent. And I would like to see if they don't become permanent, they need to be rolled right into the CHIPS formula. One application. Right now, we have a lot of office time chewed up, filling out 3 separate applications, 3 submittals. The CHIPS folks at DOT do a great job. As a matter of fact, I called on my check the other day. I said, we're getting nervous over here. Did you get all our paperwork? And Ed Rakowski for New York DOT here, he's great. Was able to hook up with him that afternoon. Any questions I have, they're great about that. So I really don't have any complaints as far as the CHIPS formula goes. We just need to make those monies permanent, and we need to simplify the process because I'll tell you, I'm very fortunate. I have 4 support staff in the office. I have 2 people answering the phones and doing clerical work, and I have two people in the office, boots on the ground type of guys people that can help gather information and pull things together. Paul does a lot of the bidding and things like that. So I'm very fortunate. But I'll tell you, And these smaller municipalities where there's, two guys, including the superintendent, I can't tell you the number of guys I call all day long. They say, oh, sorry, I couldn't answer the phone. I was running a chainsaw, or I was on a tractor or something like that. That's really the reality. There's 932 towns or highway superintendents in Erie County, or in New York State, and I would think the vast majority of them are probably, out working and really don't have time for this clerical stuff. And they have nobody in the office. There's nobody answering the phones. They're going back to the office at the end of the day, it's greasy and sweaty, and listen to the answering machine. So that's the reality of it. So can't speak for myself, but I could put a little shout in for those guys to make it a little easier on them. That's all.
We'll just want to reinforce that our conference has really been a strong advocate on rolling that money into the CHIPS formula. CHIPS base aid. The problem we have, quite frankly, is dealing with the governor, because the governor, if he puts in an extreme winter recovery, where it seems to be used a lot, he did the 5-year for the Pave New York, but with extreme winter recovery, he can eliminate it like he did last year. And he said, I'm not cutting CHIPS, but you are cutting money that's going to our local infrastructure. And we've had arguments and discussions with, talk to DOT staff, talk to the governor's transportation people on this, and this will continue to be a priority of ours, because it just makes the most sense. Because once it's in a CHIPS base aid, it's going to be a lot harder to go after that money. So that needs to be a priority, so that's something we'll continue to work on.
Very good.
Paul Engler, Town of Clarence, Highway Department. I'm a crew chief. But Phil, I only have one quick thing, and that's you said about the culvert formula and stuff like that. Like Jamie said, we have a lot of culverts in town, and we have a big drainage study that we had done, and we're doing big drainage projects. Where we run into some problems is there's culverts underneath county roads that we need taken care of to help our drainage situation out. But obviously, we can't spend our money from the town to take care of a county road, and the county doesn't want to spend their money to take care of, a culvert underneath their road, even though it's going to benefit everybody. So if there's some way, and I realized, like Bridge New York, we had some applications in there and we were denied, and then we reapplied, and it going down to 50,000 helped. I think we have 4 or 5 applications in now. But even if some of the culverts went down to 25,000, it would help us, because if we start taking $25,000 out of our budget for one culvert, it kind of kills us on other projects that we need to do.
Is that the amount the culvert has to be? Because I think it was 100 at first.
It was 100 at first, then it went to 50.
Even they lowered that threshold even further.
Yeah, for some of our work, yeah, that definitely would help us, especially with, the drainage problems that we have in Amherst and Clarence, together. But that's all I have to say. But thank you very much for doing something like this. I think it's a great thing.
In addition to that, what is your guys' opinion on the CHIPS-like formula for culverts? And you might not be a ton of money at the beginning, but it might be a steady flow of money that will be coming in separate from the CHIPS formula that can be used for culverts, because we know that there's a growing need to do culvert work out there. You think that's something that would be looked on favorably?
Yes, it would be, because your most important part of your road, you go to classes or whatever, drainage is tremendously important to your road. If you don't have good drainage, you don't have a good road. So you have to maintain your culverts and your ditches before if you put a new road in and it doesn't have good drainage and good culverts, your road's basically going to fall apart. So, yeah, anything we can do to help out culverts and stuff like that would be great. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Garrett Meal. I'm the Commissioner of Public Works for Niagara County. Up in Niagara County, we maintain over 560 lane miles of highway, mostly rural highway. We have 90 bridges, and we don't have an exact count, but culverts, I believe we're at least on the order of 1,200 culverts within our system that we need to maintain. So it's a lot to take care of. And I want to kind of start by saying thank you to the assemblymen that are here for your efforts in the past. You guys you've been there to listen to us in the past. Every year, as you know, we try to reach out both in our home districts and in your Albany offices to sit down and explain to you what our needs are. It's encouraging because I hear the language coming back from the assemblymen that is what the county highway superintendents have been talking to us. I've been in my position for about 2 years, and I've become well-versed and able to talk the language that the needs that seem to be pretty common amongst the counties in the upstate area. And when I hear that language coming back from the assemblyman to us, and I can tell that you're hearing us, you're listening to us, and you're trying to work on our behalf. And I thank you for that. Assemblyman Palisano, you're a good champion for us, and that's really helped us in the past. Assemblyman Byrne, I think it's extraordinary that you're up here, all the way up here in Erie County to listen to us. It's really, upstate has a lot of needs, and seeing the delegation come out here, not just speaking to your own, but speaking to the state, I think it really makes a big difference, and I'm glad that you guys are taking this effort. And I thank you for the programs that you have provided in the past. The Pave New York has gone a long way. The weather recovery money, the Bridge New York, it's all been very beneficial to us. It's allowed us to get on to some things that we've needed to do for a long, long time, but haven't had the resources to get to. I hope that this is something that is turning into a long-term funding plan, recognizing that the infrastructure is there, because we got many, many more needs that we need to fund moving forward. And I hope that it's not tied to an election cycle, and getting through this election cycle and making sure that everybody has what they need, but that it is long-term, that everybody is listening and thinking about the needs of New York State in the long term. So we've been able to take the resources that have been provided to us. We've been paving a great number of roads. We've been able to buy equipment. We own a mill and a paver that we were able to use CHIPS funds to help us get that. We've started working with some of our towns to do joint projects, help them out and offset some of their costs. And I think the system is starting to work. It's starting to get into gear, and we need to see that grow, and we need to see that keep moving long term, not just a 5-year cycle, but a long-term permanent cycle. And I really appreciate your talk about the CHIPS type formula for culverts, because I know a lot of the towns, some culverts are basically a bridge that just doesn't get to 20 feet, but a lot of the culverts are much smaller, and they're cumbersome. They are a financial draw, but they still need to be done, and they're still important. Treating those smaller culverts like a bridge and going through the whole cycle through the DOT and a bridge design is not necessary. So if you can do some of those smaller culverts under a program like that, I think it would be very beneficial to not only the county, but our towns and other municipalities as well.
Garrett, thank you for being here today. And from the county perspective, what can you do to improve on shared services with the local town highway crews? Are there specific things that you would like to be able to tell us that we can report back to about where we can bring more cooperation? I think that's something that I'm curious about.
I believe we've established good communication with the towns. We're talking on a regular basis. There's always been shared services. I think the highway departments have always had shared services that far exceed what you see in other parts of government. Highway superintendents work great together. They know what needs to be done. They know how to get the job done. Not a one of these guys has the equipment they need to properly maintain. If they're not sharing dump trucks, they're not getting the job done. And when you come out to Niagara County, you see a county job, you'll see town trucks on our jobs, you'll see county trucks on their jobs. And it's really required that the shared services exist for us to be able to do our business. As far as what can be done at the state level, I'm not sure that there's much at that level. Maybe there's some other ideas from the towns that could help out, but I think the focus on shared services is really, it's always been there.
There's no doubt. I see the cooperation between them. I was just wondering if there's more specific things going forward, whether it be sharing blacktopping equipment, pothole killers, they call them, things like that, and maybe in terms of providing low interest rate loans or no interest rate loans to incentivize this type of cooperation, even if it's occurring as we go forward. Jamie, I was out at your place, and Dave, very familiar with yours, about equipment going long term and make sure that we have proper equipment, in the next 50 years.
Yeah, I believe some of our towns have recently got together and bought a paver. 4 or 5 towns have done that. And I'm sure that that type of financing that would help multiple municipalities share in the cost of buying some of that equipment, I think that would go a long way to helping everybody get the equipment they need to be able to do the job right.
One other quick question for you.
Okay.
One of the things we've it's been kind of a common theme is, what type of regulatory challenges you might face. And one of the ones that keeps popping up, particularly came up pretty prevalent down the southern tier, was like the MWBE requirements. Because I know they play both on the professional services, like on the engineering side, and also on the construction side. Are you seeing that those mandates become a challenge for you? Because one of the concerns we have downstate is they can't even hire local people. They have to either go downstate or sometimes even out of state to try to find someone to meet that threshold. Has that been a challenge or a problem for you?
Well, I think that's always out there, especially in the consulting world, that the minimum percentages of minority and women-owned business enterprises that are required oftentimes exceeds the capacity of the region. We just don't have enough, and what happens is they either get stretched or they're not able to respond. A consultant that might be ready to go and do their design can't get started because the company that's doing the survey is MWBE, and they're still 2 months out on being able to get out there, but there's not a lot of options out there to supplement that. So I do believe that we see it time and time again where capacity issues do come up.
Maybe a colleague has legislation that would have that rate determined by the region and what that threshold is in the region. I have a mirror of what the population is in the region for those types of things.
Yeah,
that's maybe a lot more helpful.
Anything like that would loosen up the regulations, I think, would go a long way to helping out those issues. Again, thank you guys for being here.
Hello, my name's Ted Casey, Highway Superintendent for the town of Hamburg. And I want to thank you, gentlemen, first and foremost, that what's been reiterated. Appreciate you guys taking the time out of your days to help understand what we are going through as highway superintendents. This is my first year in office, and it's been quite eye-opening. We have 156 miles of center lane roads. We currently are budgeted to handle about 5 miles, actually a little bit less than 5 miles, which turns out to a life expectancy of 30 years. However, everyone knows, or most know, that a road normally lasts on the order of 15 to 20. And so the CHIPS Fund plays a real big part in helping Hamburg. However, as I've been trying to work with my board, we're behind the 8 ball. And from like a football metaphor standpoint, infrastructure is basic blocking and tackling. It's not sexy. It's not Odell Beckham going for a bomb. But Odell doesn't get off the line of scrimmage, and the quarterback doesn't get time unless that road is paved. And I appreciate what Sheriff Howard alluding to as far as what does the highway department do for law enforcement, for ambulance service. Someone else said it at a conference I was at earlier in Verona, that we are the first ones there, and we're often the last ones there at an event. And we did a study. I had 2 studies done this past summer of the condition of our roads. One by the county, they did one, and then one by the Cornell Roads Program. And they identified about 15% of our roads are rated as poor. That equates to 25 miles, essentially. And at a clip of just under 5 miles a year, we will never get ahead. And I think there's just again, I'm new to the position. The understanding, the appreciation for what is the purpose of the infrastructure. Just take care of my road, spare me the details and everything else. But it is very expensive to do it. But as one of the council members in Hamburg said to me, that doesn't sound like such a bad number, 15% being rated as poor, to which I said, why don't you ask the people that live on those 20 miles of road, what they think about poorly rated roads. And then behind that, we have another 20 miles of fair rated roads that statistically will become poor within 5 years. So anything you guys can do to help us get more monies and persuade my board. That'd also be nice too. But I didn't get into this just to be a lame duck or a potted plant. Folks have told me, good luck this winter, and good luck with the paving season. I don't want luck. I want to be able to solve these problems infrastructure-wise. And our number one priority is safety. My background is safety. Worked in Siemens as a global safety director. And without the infrastructure and our roads, bad things happen. And quality of life is certainly impacted by our infrastructure and what condition it is in. So again, I want to thank you folks for hopefully carrying that baton and persuading your counterparts. Thank you.
Good evening, James Spark, Town of Royalton Highway Superintendent. I've worked for the municipality for 29 years. My third year as Highway Superintendent. Again, I'd like to appreciate all the assemblymen coming up and listen to our needs. Definitely, Town of Royalton is a rural town, basically grain, dairy, 87 miles of town road. We're one of the largest towns by size in New York State. So we cover a lot of area from Tonawanda Creek to north of the Erie Canal. So it's a large town. This year we've had a lot of early in the year, we've had issues with dairy, overweight equipment, as you were talking. It was big this year. We had a real good meeting with our farmers in the area, in the county, at the Cornell Cooperative Extension Office. They had a good turnout. But there's definitely a need to continue to keep the funding coming through the CHIPS. The Bridge New York funding for culverts, we've applied twice now for Bridge New York money. One of the issues that I have with it, it went from 3 pages to 20-some pages of filling out. It made it really complicated and cost the municipalities, at least our municipality, a large amount of money and more funding. And it could have paid for some of the jobs. So I think there's a lot of red tape in it that I see. The CHIPS formulas work great for us in the town of Royalton. We use it every year. I don't see a need in changing it other than in funding it more. We use it every year. It works very well for us. We're still able to do a lot of chip sealing, but we do major road repair every year with it. I also see crumbling road infrastructure. We had a town road closed this year along Tonawanda Creek, Erie County, failing, and the town doesn't have the funding to be able to keep it open, or we're going to be searching for some sort of funding to put it back in place. But like I said, the CHIPS funding, I think we need to keep after that. The Bridge New York funding, make that easier for the municipalities. I just think the red tape kind of got more difficult instead of being able to keep it more local, on my part. As shared services, we do a lot of shared services. It's difficult, in our town, well, like I said, we take care of 87 miles of road. We have seven workers, and 2/3 of them have 20-some years. They're older workforce. They have a lot of time off. So we do shared services a lot. If it wasn't for neighboring towns to come in and help with trucks and work with us, we wouldn't be able to get our work done. We're just, like everybody else, we're short of workforce. It's very difficult. But I do appreciate your time. I've been to Albany the last 3 years for the Advocacy Day. The funding increase has been greatly appreciated in the town of Royalton, and continue to like to see it increased. Keep after it. So, thank you.
One quick question for you guys, too.
Yes, sir.
With the CHIPS, when we go around the state, especially in the rural areas, like when we talk to our downstate colleagues, they always talk about the MTA being the lifeblood of New York City, which we understand. It's a vital part of New York City. But we explained to them that sometimes the CHIPS program is like the lifeblood of many of our upstate rural communities. Sometimes it's the only money some of these communities had to spend on their local infrastructure. For you guys, what percentage is CHIPS for your overall, your infrastructure budget? And like I said, some have it as well, but is it certainly is it a big part of it? Or
I'm fortunate in the town of Royalton, we have a pretty good highway budget, but it's takes care of about half of our highway budget. CHIPS does, so maybe a little more than half. And certainly greatly appreciative of it. The winter recovery money, the Pave New York money was greatly needed, and we're using it. So, like I said, I appreciate every ounce of it.
With that threshold level we were talking about earlier, with Pat about where you had to have a $250,000 cap before you can just go out. Anything above $250,000, you have to go for a competitive bid. Would raising that cap allow you more flexibility so you can do that work in-house?
I think it would make it easier on the paperwork end of it for certainly the highway superintendents, yes, or their
Well, from
offices.
250 to 500, would that be a big help? Or I know obviously you said, why don't we look to $1 million? That might be a push for some people. I mean, but any level we can get above the current level would be helpful, do you think?
I believe so. I mean, yes. So what do you guys think? Yeah. Thank you.
So I'm Jeff Stoll, Town of Pendleton Highway Superintendent. We're the poor stepchild of Clarence and Amherst. They're really large. So we have 28 lane miles. Our CHIPS funding is about $80,000. My overall budget is $175,000. This year we did a subdivision that cost $135,000. So that ate up the majority of our budget. I have $40,000 left over to work on my 27 other miles of road, and it's not enough. So I don't know where we can get money. It's budget season for all of us, too. I asked for a double increase for my town board, and I got laughed at a little bit. So the local help isn't too impressive. Again, thank you in the past. CHIPS has been awesome for the towns. We need an increase. I don't know how we get it. Somebody said before, we're fighting all the other people for money. We just would like our share. Same drainage is very important in Pendleton. We take care of all the off-road drainage. Niagara County has a lot of roads cutting through the town of Pendleton. We maintain all the off-road drainage for their roads as well. So in Pendleton, I say we have to clean our ditches every 3 to 5 years, off-road drainage. And if we don't, as Clarence and Amherst knows, we get a 2 or 3 inch rainstorm that we're getting constantly, our neighborhoods are flooding out. So that's real important. The formula works good for us. It's based on road miles. These guys get a lot more money than we do based on the road miles. We're a growing town. Our subdivisions are flying off the shelf. Cornell taught us to keep your good roads good. And chip sealing, crack sealing, micro sealing, paving are all the ways to do that. And as you just heard from me, $40,000 is what I ended up to work on all my roads isn't enough. I just had a company come in and crack seal 2 roads. 3 miles cost about $18,000 just to seal the cracks. So, which is the first line of defense in the whole system. So, it's not enough. Thank you for what you guys have done in the past. You guys have been awesome. You listen to us every year. I've been 13 years doing it now. Your doors are always open in Albany, and Ray's are in town, so we appreciate that. So any way to increase it's important. We in Niagara County, I can't speak for the other counties, but we share services all day long. Make a call to anybody. You can get a roller, a dump truck. And I know we can use the CHIPS for funding for equipment. I was telling Dave from Lockport on the ride up here, our newest tandem dump truck is over 12 years old. That's our newest one. Dump truck right now costs about $225,000. So that's a big money item for us as well. Thank you.
I would just say, just one of our biggest frustrations with our conference and one of our colleagues is there could be money there if it was done properly. You got the dedicated highway bridge
Correct.
trust fund.
Yep.
That took in about 3.2 billion was dispersed last year, but that's not all going for capital. I think 39% of that was going for debt services, 38% was going for state operations for DOT and DMV, and about 20% was going for capital. Even those fees that are put on like petroleum business tax, not all that dollars goes into the dedicated bridge and trust fund.
Right.
It's going to it's only goes into general fund. The sales tax on gasoline, the 520 million for state share, all that goes into general fund, or half it goes in general fund, other half goes to pay for revenue bonds, sales tax revenue bonds. But yet, the other staggering number, there's a study done a few years ago, we collect about $4.7 billion annually in driver-related fees, sales tax, petroleum business tax, all these other taxes and fees. Only $2 billion of that is going to dedicated infrastructure. That's a frustration right there. When you think $520 million in the state sales tax, that's more than the CHIPS program alone. And the CHIPS is bonded. I mean, that's something that can pay for it without having to bond it. I mean, it would save money on the back end. So there's definitely a frustration we have, and that's something we continue to try to beat the drum on, because that just makes sense. I think people expect, if you talk to the taxpayers out there, they would think that when they're paying sales tax on gasoline, that money's going for infrastructure.
Right.
It's not.
Right.
I mean, it's ridiculous, you know? That's one of the things we really need to get at that would really be helpful in this fight.
Jeff, I just wanted to jump in at one point. I know we've talked about shared services a couple times now, and it's a very common theme. This is the sixth task force meeting we have. Every time it comes up, it's basically that highway department's invented shared services, and that's a common theme that we've heard, I think, in every portion of the state thus far. And it's also pointed out, you know, if you stretch a rubber band, how much more can you stretch it? And when the governor announced the shared services initiative, and that the eligibility was really for new shared services, there's some people feel a little slighted, since it's almost like you're penalized because you've been doing it and you're not eligible. So the eligibility for that shared services money is something I think we've heard about frustration. And to Phil's point, you know, we have a state budget of close to $168 billion. And at the end of the day, it comes towards about priorities, where you're going to put your dollars. Infrastructure is certainly, I think everyone at this table believes in, it's got to be a top priority. And I think the gasoline tax is a great way to say, like, those dollars. I think everyone, you talk to any commuter or any driver, they expect those dollars to go into infrastructure or roads, and that's definitely part of it. But I wanted to make sure I said something about shared services, because that is something we've been hearing as feedback from everybody.
Yeah, and that's a good point. We don't want to get punished in Niagara County. We do an awesome job. So for somebody to bring it up that they invented it, they've been doing it long before my time, and we continue it. And any minute, at any time, you can call anybody for anything, and they'll help you out. And if they happen to be using the roller, the other neighbor will loan us the roller. And same thing with a dump truck. Niagara County did help Pendleton out this year. They saved us about $12,000. They have a nice milling machine. So they came in and milled a subdivision for us, and we helped them a lot during the summer, haul blacktop for them. And it's just make a call, try to get in the schedule early, and you'll get it done. And if you don't, those are for larger projects. You know, we're going to be patching some potholes as fall goes along here. We don't have a small roller. Dave and a couple other towns have a small roller. So I've already talked to a couple of them, whatever their schedule is, we work it out, and we get it. A roller would cost us $50,000 with a trailer. So that's 50 grand we can save and put towards our tandem dump truck this year.
Thank you.
You know, Jeff, Jim, Jamie, Pat, you guys all border Tonawanda Creek on the north and south side each of you. So, I mean, we've had issues with the road falling into the creek on both your towns, both our towns here. And I mean, it's an ongoing issue. I just wonder, you know, is there who handles that? I mean, who's in charge of the creek, the flows, and everything like that? I mean,
Ray, I could step in on that. and my name's David Miller. I'm from the town of Lockport in Niagara County. I've got 100 centerline miles of road. I am a member of the state executive committee, as Jamie is over there. You have two of us here tonight that represent the state highway superintendent's organization. And to answer your question on that, I think that's mostly regulated by the DEC. And I'm going to tell you a story. It's funny you should bring that up, that me and Jamie worked on a project together. We went to the DEC with concerns of trees in the middle of the creek, and they said, just that's nature, just leave that alone. Well, that tree snagged on to about an 18-foot boat, didn't it, Jamie?
Somebody abandoned a boat in the creek, yeah.
The boat floated away, got in the middle of the creek, directed the direction of the water into a different way, caved in somebody's backyard right up to their back porch. All because the DEC would not let us go in there and do this. After the fact, we had our engineers get a 30-day permit. I worked with Jamie, and we're in different counties. He's in Erie County, I'm in Niagara County. And we worked together, and we got that boat and that tree out of there, and some of us were right in the water, and we did this with our own.
I brought 3 guys, you brought 3 guys, you brought an excavator, I brought a dozer.
Yep.
One way or the other,
We got it done, but we fight this DEC all the time, and we shouldn't be. They should be partners with us, and it's a struggle. And it's a struggle to clean ditches through wetlands. And this is, if you help, we want help. We want help loosening, having our hands tied from the DEC, trying to get our road drainage taken through these wetlands and these areas that we're allowed to go in there with a hand clippers. That's the response we get from them. We put in an application, say we would like to clean this ditch, and they go, no, we're denying it, but you can go in there with hand clippers and hand trim that. Really? What day and age are we in? That's an answer? I mean, that's not an answer. That's a slap in the face. And, some legislation or something to help us clean these areas through these wetlands. It's an existing ditch. It's there. They're worried about the spoils, where we put the spoils and this and that. And they just want to tie our hands where we can't get this work done. And they should be an advocate, and they should be partnered with. Instead, they work against us. And that, was one of the things. They caused a lot of property damage. People call us, say, what are we paying taxes for? We say we can't work in that creek. We say we can't work in that area. We can't drain this road drainage because it goes through a wetland and we can't get in there. Several years ago, we went out of the wetlands and put a ditch down through somebody else's property to divert so we could go through an area and do this. And it's a struggle. They make it very hard for us. We have to sometimes pay our town money to our engineers to put these applications in. But that's just one item, and I'm going to touch on a couple that. But.
And that's a great point. We've struggled over the years too, and you try to be nice to the DEC. They have a job to do too, but again, the flatness of our towns in Niagara County, it's important to get the water out. We're not trying to destroy the whole lay of the land, but we have to get the water to drain. So. Yeah.
Now, and a couple things like the shared services, I'm not going to beat that to death, but we invented it, okay? And it's almost a slap in our face to say, you guys need to do this. We do it on a scale that would blow their mind away that nobody could put on paper, okay? So that's an old thing that's already done, and it's a dead issue, to be honest with you. We just do it, and we do it well. A couple things is like our town, our residents got used to paved roads. The last couple of years, and I know it because I saw it on the news with Erie County, we're going to chipping and sealing a lot of roads because our dollar doesn't take us far enough. And as far as dollars go, the town of Lockport, they put in twice what I get in chips. If I get $200,000 in chips, they put in an additional $400. So they do the due diligence the town does. We don't just rely on chips money. We put our money in. The town does a good job, and we try to keep up with the best we can. One suggestion I would like to make is that obviously we talked about rolling this money over from, Bridge New York and all this stuff into chips. But I think there should be another line item, as we all talked about here tonight, and we won't beat it to death, but these culverts could be a line item. And I think that we need to, instead of extreme winter recovery, we need to have extreme drainage recovery, because all our towns are in extreme need of replacing these galvanized steel culverts that were put in 40 years old. They're all rotten out. And, till something happens, like, I was a volunteer fireman for years and an exempt fireman, And I rave about our fire departments and think they get everything they deserve. And after 9/11, there was a whole bunch of money. All these fire departments look great. They got new fire trucks and new, brand new, shiny floors when you walk in there. But when you walk in the highway departments, look at those buildings and look at that equipment. His newest truck's 12 years old. Would you see a fire truck that was 12 years old in most of those fire companies? So what's it going to take? Is it going to take a bridge to collapse? Is it going to take a culvert to collapse and a busload of kids get hurt? What's it going to take to all of a sudden that we get the funding to help us take care of this problem? And, you know, maybe our shops should look that good. Maybe our equipment should look that good. You know what I'm saying? I'm not trying to be on a negative note, but there should be some parity. And we've talked about this parity with the state and the funding and things, and me and Jamie hear a lot of this stuff. You know, we go to the state meetings and we hear all this stuff, and so we get a little passionate about it. So sorry if I sound that way to you, but you know, sometimes some things just need to be said. And just trying to see on my list here if I had anything else that I wanted to talk about. No, and just one last thing, and we're going to pass this on, is that, you know, like Mike Norris said, you know, our constituents come to us and they say, you know, what do we pay our tax money for? You know, what do we pay for? You know, you hear that all the time. Why are we paying taxes? What are we paying taxes for? Well, people do want certain things. They want their water to run, they want their sewer to work, and they want decent roads. And you know what? People don't mind paying their taxes if they're getting that. And if we could hold the governor's heels to the fire here and get some more of this gas tax money that we're entitled to, that was supposed to go to this, money being diverted that should go to the highways. And that's where we need to get, where we wouldn't have to fund and bond all this stuff if we get that tax money back where it belongs. On that note, thank you guys for being here today. Really appreciate this meeting.
Volunteers, thank you for what you do for our communities. I know FAST did a study if the services our volunteers provided to our rural communities had to be paid services that cost an additional $3.2 billion annually in property taxes. So not only are you as volunteers looking out for the safety of your neighbors, you're also looking out for the property taxpayer. The culvert idea has been something that has been since we started talking about it, a prevalent theme in our meetings and when we bring it up, and I'm glad you're reinforcing that. You know, the question is going to come up, is it something, how would you measure something like that? I would think you guys have a log of, I think, a register of like how many culverts you have, how big of a 5 foot, a 10 foot, a 15 foot. So it really have to be figuring out a formula on how to do that. But I think most municipalities would have an inventory of those where they could figure out a formula on based on that type of information.
And we do. We have it out.
Yeah. Unfortunately, with the amount of culverts we have, the town of Clarence has a bridge and a culvert inventory. It's right on our desk in a prominent spot. We can look any of them up. But the reality of it is, when you look at the budgets and the drainage accounts that we have, you almost don't replace them until they fail.
Right.
And it's sad, but 90% of the time, you know, somebody calls, they were walking their dog, and I saw a little hole in the, you know, and I'll go out there and be like, oh man, let's get some cones on this thing, you know. And most of the time, it's not a let's, you know, plan for this, fund it, that type of thing. It's an immediate replacement. And with some of the bigger stuff, you know, that's a problem because, as you know, culverts don't get inspected regularly. A lot of bridges, things that we would see as bridges, are actually culverts. Anything less than 20 foot is considered a culvert. So, you know, as a matter of fact, one of the bridges that we had on Martin Road that we applied for ourselves and did the simpler application, three-page application that we applied for. It went to the first round. It was actually the first and second round of bridge funding. It was denied. I mean, there was a lot of, you know, competition. Amherst got one. I think Lockport got one, which I'm glad for those municipalities. I'm happy for them. Subsequently, we were going to a capital project meeting with our supervisor and a couple town board members and department heads, and we were kind of strategizing what we had to do. I knew this bridge wasn't in the greatest shape. we decided to go ahead and have a professional engineer do the typical bridge type inspection, and it was immediately taken out of service. And that was a similar bridge that we had, sent pictures to, and, they just didn't pick up on, the rusted beams and things like that. But immediately, the consultant called and said, do you have any Jersey barriers? We gotta get some barriers up on this thing, this road's closed. I'm like, had to call bus garages and set things up. We were in a good spot because we were able to take allocate $250,000 out of our fund balance and get that replaced the same year. We bumped everything up, schedules, everything, top priority in town. We were able to replace that. It's tough. It's tough.
Jamie, in terms of the equipment, does the town typically buy the equipment, or they bond the equipment, or do they use the CHIPS funding towards the equipment, the snow plows,
We realize we have the ability to fund the equipment through the CHIPS formula. We do not. We have a combination of bond money and budget money. So more bond money than budget money. We take advantage of, we have, the rates, and then when the rates are down, which they are or were, we borrow. When it's beneficial to, do it the other way, spend cash, then we spend cash. We have the same limits. It's a tax cap world. We all, try to live within it, and, so that's what we try to do. But just the one question that came up, we're about a third. So we get about $243,000 in CHIPS, and our paving budget is a little bit over $700, something like that. So it's about a third of our budget.
That's another question, especially to the municipal highway superintendents. I know you mentioned a tax cap, and this has come up as well too in some of our areas, where would be helpful if exempt from the tax cap. Sometimes they would try to exempt from the tax cap certain things. We don't have much luck with that because the governor doesn't like to have any messing with the tax cap. But still, that being said, capital infrastructure type projects, capital projects, or even with some of the flooding we keep having on, storm and disaster recovery type efforts. Would something like that being exempt from the tax cap, would that be helpful in your operation?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
As well too?
Yes.
Yeah, that would be a big.
It's hard to get it puts the board in jeopardy, the town board in jeopardy for their future by doing that, but yes. Any way we can get money would be helpful.
All right, I'm gonna pass the torch on here, but in finishing, I'd like to say, we do, just so you guys know, we do realize what you guys are up against. We know that you go to Albany, beat your head against the wall because you want to get us more money, and we know that it's a fight for you, and we know that you want to get it for us, and we know, and we appreciate that you fighting for us, but we know what you're up against. We see it.
Yeah, I'm Bill Schmitz. I work for Granada Asphalt Products, small family-owned business, Southern Erie County, and we do work with a lot of the highway officials, and I'd like to go on record as saying they do a great job with the little bit of money they got to work with and with their hands being tied. We're a huge supporter of what they do, and we count on the roads for our employees to get to work and to get back home safe to their families, and also we use them to transport our materials we make. But I'm here today because I'm a board member of the Fair Committee, which is a coalition here in Western New York of contractors, labor, engineering firms, material suppliers, and we even include the local governmental agencies. And our goal is to bring our fair share of money back to Western New York, because sometimes we get forgotten by the Albany mentality. They kind of forget. Western New York, Region 5 has 11% of the state roads, and we kind of organized this group when we realized we were getting less than 5% of the funding for highways. We've struggled, we've got it back up, but we're like a lot of the state, we're kind of in a negative mode right now because the Hudson Valley down through the city are getting a majority of the funds, but the person in the big seat recognizes where his votes come from. We've got over 100 members, anywhere from 5 to over 100 employees. So we represent thousands of employees, but what we also do is represent everybody in Western New York. Our goal is public awareness. We raise our own money, and we call on David and Ray. You've been great with helping us get the word out, taking the word back to Albany. And we're looking for the prosperity of Western New York. We want Western New York, and I know it goes likewise. The same problem exists around the state, that the rural areas get forgotten, and they don't necessarily even have a group that will show that. And, the numbers came out at, 22% of our money we take in for all the user fees gets actually put into highways. The rest goes for debt service and all that other. The numbers have came out. All the comments come out are things that we talk and fight about here. We work really hard to track on-system, off-system stuff in Region 5, and we find that very difficult. The DOT people, I'm not sure, they don't have the information. It's extremely difficult to get it. We've pushed, and as a lot of the Assembly has, for a lot of the local projects to go through the state regions and the money passed through to the counties. We're finding it very difficult to track what's actually being spent, where the money's going, if it's being spent. Unfortunately, in Region 5 right now, we have leadership that is has really no backbone. So Region 5 is suffering. We have only let 20% of our program this year, and out of the 20% that's been let, over half of it's the Niagara Gorge project, the Robert Moses Parkway. Other than that, the amount is barely over 10%, and we're halfway through the year. We feel the counties do a great job of administering the local programs, and that should be a focus. The Bridge New York, the Pave New York, good programs, just very hard to follow the bouncing ball as to where the funds end up. So we're pushing as what we do. We work with GB, NRTC, and we try to get the Western New York region together. Big problem we've had in Region 5 this year is half of the budget was designated, $75 million, to go to the revamp of the Skajacwood, and as you know, that project was shelved, and the region has no projects to backfill. So ostensibly, we're going to end up losing a good portion because there's no projects on the shelf, nothing to be done, and they are really hesitant to put it out to the counties to spend the money that was allocated to Western New York. What we really need is a consistent program. These guys in the room, us as people who supply them, contractors, we need a consistent program. We can't wait every year till the spring and find out what the budget's going to be. We shouldn't have to go to Albany and fight and make people aware. We should have a consistent funding. The guys in this room can put together a budget saying in 2 years, I got to do this road, I can do this culvert. Right now, as Ted said, you've got to plan what you can, and you take care of the worst case scenarios first. So a long-term, consistent funding would be great. As contractors and suppliers, the other thing we're facing on contracted work and bringing in consultants are the ridiculous MWBE requirements in New York. It may be fine in New York City, and there was a disparity study done, and apparently the disparity study was done by SurveyMonkey because the only people who called in were minority firms in the city. How do you put a 30% requirement in a rural county like Niagara County or Chautauqua or Cattaraugus? I mean, it's ridiculous, and it's holding up work from being done, and it's also discriminating against our local employees from being able to work on projects because fake set-asides are being used. So we locally and statewide are trying to fight that. Permitting, we talked about, the DEC. These guys all said drainage is important. Well, they've not incurred the wrath, I bet they all have, of the DEC of cleaning a ditch when you didn't clean it properly, or where's the spoil going. As an industry of materials producers, we lodged a lawsuit against the DEC, against the new implementation of Part 360, which was done with complete disregard for the law of hazardous and material waste. This is costing us money to fight a rule that was put in place, and it's going to affect everybody here if we can't completely bring it to a stop, because the requirements are so onerous and unnecessary. And as a producer of construction materials, asphalt's the most recycled product in America, and they're limiting our ability to recycle it and really forcing us and you folks to take it to a landfill to handle if this rule goes through. So we've got a lot of things that are out there, and whether we're private business or the public sector, we all fight them, and we need to work together, get a clear, concise, long-term plan, and not have our hands tied to get the work done. Again, kudos, thank you so much for your help for what we've done, and we're here to help you guys also. So when you have something that's before you and you need legislation passed, you need people to rattle chains, write letters, we can be of help too. So we appreciate it.
You mentioned fair, and we're about 11% for Region 5. I thought last year we came in at we never reached 11. We came in at did you say we got our equal share last year?
Oh no, we've been low, and this year we're scheduled between 7 and 8. We got it one year about 10 years ago. In the pre-Cuomo days, we hit it, but
we're always stuck at 6 to 7.
yeah,
We never get a fair.
no, we do not, and whatever we can do to help rattle the cage, we need it here. We really do.
And that's just a budget difference, considering what's let out and actually.
Yeah, it's a big issue now. We just had a meeting with the DOT president on Tuesday night, and they've got no plans. They could offer us nothing. We don't know. We don't. How does anybody plan? We, as a business owner, we couldn't run a business this way.
Can I touch on one thing? Sure. When you're talking about letting the bids out, we're planning for next year and 2 years from now, 3 years from now. And as soon as we have the weather, like we were paving in April, we were paving with winter hats on. We were so excited to go. We had everything we needed. We had the funding. We had everything. We were ready to go. We know a lot of guys in the industry, okay? So we know all the people with the stone plants, all the private contractors and stuff in town, and they're sitting. And they're like, well, the state's just not letting the work out, And this stuff trickles out in like June, July. Well,
Right.
you lost half the season.
They bid it in June, and
That's why I don't wanna ramble
right,
on.
they bid it in June and don't award it,
And
and
I know a
yeah.
lot of people that have 10, 15, 20 dump trucks sitting. The drivers are on unemployment, or if they're fortunate enough to be able to come and get paid and wash the windows and do maintenance. But I know, how many contractors do we know that are just waiting on that state work? That 290 work, that 90 work, and it's happening in the midsummer. They're not ready to go first thing. So, sorry, I didn't mean to.
Bill, can you just comment again and just expand a little bit on what you said before about the limiting on the recycled asphalt? Because some of the things I've heard locally, even in my district, is success with using reclaimed asphalt. And can you just expand on that again? So what was it, the DEC you mentioned? Yeah, the DEC last fall instituted a new regulation with the handling of recycled, we call it Rubicars, which is recycled asphalt, concrete, dirt fill, clean fill,
And they basically turned it all into solid waste and made it to where you would have to go to a registered facility and track it. And they made the rules so confusing that even their own people couldn't understand them. So as an industry, we ended up having to do it because it limited the amount we could bring in to 500 tons a night. And I know these guys who know paving, when you're out milling a major road, you'll mill 2,000 tons in a day, and they limit it to 500 tons. And when you reach your 500-ton threshold, you'd then have to go to a solid waste facility, a landfill, to dispose of them. And we'll take them, we'll reuse them, we'll turn them into usable product. So we're fighting it now, and it's in negotiation to see where it's going.
So has that been fully implemented then?
We have a letter from the commissioner of the DEC with a non-enforcement, that they're not enforcing it, but they never shared that letter with their own people, but they've been fining and stopping people from doing business as usual because they never inform their own people. So the rule, I think, was close to 1,200 pages long, and it contradicted itself repeatedly. That in one chapter it would say this was allowable, the next one it wasn't allowable, and we've spent a lot of money already trying to get it straightened around, and we're having limited success.
It's going to be a significant cost shift to the municipalities when they're trying to do their work too.
Yes, well, when they realized the cost shift of what it was going to do and the impact it was going to make, they added a caveat that all municipalities are exempted from the new rule, which is completely against the law. The law handles the material. It designates that you specify the material regardless of who's using it. This did the exact opposite. The same material that was considered solid waste for us was not to the municipality. That was their way of getting around a bad rule.
I remember meeting with Ken and Rich about that.
Yes, I'm sure you received a lot of letters on that. So, and we appreciate your effort. So, thank you.
Good evening. No one here probably knows me. I am Brad Bentley. I'm the Director of Public Facilities for Chautauqua County. I took over for George Spanos, if you remember George. So I am the new, yeah, everybody knew George. So, yeah, sorry for being late today. I had some other businesses. I'm trying to learn the job, and I got a lot of things to take care of.
You probably got stuck in traffic getting here too, right? Because of infrastructure?
Well, they were working on it. I hit some construction in Chautauqua and up here as well. So I'm 2 months into the job, so I'm just learning what's going on. But certainly from a CHIPS, Pave New York, bridge, we use that money. We heavily rely on it. Without that, we wouldn't be able to get the progress that we've done. But we make choices every year, so we have to prioritize our work. It's certainly a challenge to try and figure out which ones we need to do. I'll jump on the culvert comment. I think that's a bear in waiting that's out there. That, how do you know how much is truly underneath there without those inspections? We try and do the jobs we know about when we get residential complaints. It usually filters in with, hey, I got a drainage problem somewhere. And so then you go out and you go, oh, geez, how did this happen? And we try and look for things. So we're doing the work that we can, but, I would reinforce the dollars we get, we're thankful for. We can always use more to, get further down our list, because we never get the work done that we want to get done, that we need to get done. The extreme weather, I'm a big supporter of that as well. And we're off in the corner of the state, so I definitely wanted to make sure I got up here and introduce myself. And for those that knew George, wanted to I'll let everybody know who I am. So next year, if you have something like this, I'll be coming with probably more information and whatnot. But I do want to thank you for your efforts for getting us what we have, and I'll certainly go to bat to ask for more. So, thank you.
If you ever get more information, please feel free to, along the way, or you think of something, feel free to share with our committee, or you contact Andy Goodell. I'm sure you know Andy well.
Yep, I know Andy. So yeah, definitely. Like I said, as I jump into it, we're finishing up a lot of the projects that George had started, and when we start to look at next year, our budgets are constrained each year, and we're trying to utilize equipment to its fullest extent. Actually, one of the things when I came up through the budget cycle, I'm at the tail end of it for getting the 2019 budget approved. Our maintenance costs on our vehicles are going through the roof right now, and that's indicative of just the old car scenario. You're trying to maintain an old car where if you buy a new one, your maintenance costs go down, but trying to find that capital money while you're trying to actually fix the roads. So you get a choice. You put it into the capital plan to reduce maintenance costs. It's a rob Peter to pay Paul type game at a certain point. So those challenges were challenges just in the 2 months I've been here, and I think they're going to be even more challenging next year. So, but yeah, I'll certainly take you up on your offer.
Well, I'm glad nobody knows me here. I'm just a private citizen. I've been a firefighter and an EMT. I did 10 years. I've been a trucker for 20 or 30, driven all over Western New York and New York, Pennsylvania. And I know how critical it is for these roads to be fixed properly the first time rather than penny pinching them because they don't have enough money to bid the projects the way that they like to do it. Every time I see a paved road, blacktopped, it makes me cringe as a trucker because not just as a trucker, as a regular four-wheeler, when these rut out because they should have been done right the first time, not just milled and paved, but the drainage. That's all I hear when I do deliveries to some of you guys. Probably don't recognize, and that's good. But when I would do deliveries to some of you guys, all I heard was drainage, drainage, drainage. So your culverts, your bridges, and all this, it's just very frustrating as a taxpayer, and I'm conservative. I'm real glad to see David here. I'm real glad to see Mr. Walter here locally, and I hope the Eastern New York representatives listen to these guys and all of these professionals. It's not just, I hate saying it, throwing money at a problem doesn't always fix it, but unfortunately in this case, it's your core fundamental roads, bridges, and not a lot about gas and sewer and power, or, water lines. Every time something like that goes down, it creates an exponential cost and problem. As a taxpayer, I'm tired of seeing the Band-Aid solutions go about because they won't get enough money for it. Whether it's chips or this or that, it sounds like it's a comparison to a capital project for schools. You know what? It just seems that they need more money, and if they're the pros, document it, write it down, and say, hey, have them somehow create a plan, for the next year or the 2 years or 5 year or short-term, long-term. Say how much you need for these projects and send it all in as a plan, short-term, long-term. And it just seems to me that they communicate very well with one another. They work well with one another. But here in the battles between DEC and highway departments, why are our governmental agencies fighting one another? Why are our politicians fighting one another? Why don't we just get the job done right the first time and give them the money to do it?
Hi, my name is Timothy Woodbury. I'm with Greenman Peterson Incorporated. I'm also a resident of the town of Newstead, and I live on Davison Road. Across the street is Clarence. It is very flat, but the sunsets are great. Western New York is a wonderful place. I was once Deputy Director of Public Works in Chautauqua County, where at the time Andy Goodell was the Assistant County Attorney, and he and I worked together once upon a time. I'm here as an engineer, and I wasn't quite sure how I could be helpful. Well, I'm pretty good at writing reports, so I wrote your report. I have copies of it, and I'll give it to you. When I write an engineering report, I start with the facts, and we talk about the needs. And then we talk about the potential options. And then we, at the end of the report, we conclude what we're going to do. I think that's kind of what you guys are going through right now. So hopefully this will be helpful. My report talks about infrastructure and the definition of it and the purpose of it. My report talks about the difference between transportation and water infrastructure. I didn't notice anybody here really talking about water infrastructure, but I noticed in your documentation that that's also something that you're addressing on your committee. There are some similarities and some differences between water and transportation, and I talk about that in this brief report. This report is very brief. It's only 2 pages long. It's on double-sided paper. I talk about funding needs, and I did a little plagiarism. I actually looked online today at a report that I found last year by the RAND Corporation, and they talked about the infrastructure on the national level. You guys are talking about infrastructure on the state level. So I've cited that, and there's a website in reference to that report that you're welcome to find and see how these professionals at the RAND Corporation kind of did what you are doing at a national level. And the end of my report doesn't really conclude with what to do, but it gives you 14 ideas as potentially what you may want to do. I call them potential changes. And some of them address some of the things that people have talked about today. Paul talked about, how do you get Erie County to cooperate with the town of Clarence to deal with a regional issue related to a drainage of a culvert that affects multiple jurisdictions. Well, in preparing for this today, I was more focusing on capital investment as opposed to a lot of the O&M and the chip type stuff today. So my focus on my 14 points is mostly about capital. And that's kind of because I was kind of using the model of the RAND Corporation. But if you do look at the priority for projects with compelling jurisdictional, health, safety, and environmental benefits, and choose those projects where the local governments demonstrate that they can work together to identify their top priorities, that should be perhaps one criteria for establishing where to spend your money best. So that's just one example of the 14 points. I'll stop right there.
Well, hello, my name is Noel Dill, and I'm here a little bit different than a lot of everybody else, and then I represent real estate development. I also represent a Main Street organization called Discover Main Street in Clarence. And we spent 5 years working together with other stakeholders in the town of Clarence, working with the town, working with the Chamber of Commerce, working with the Clarence Hall Association to try and put together a comprehensive plan for our Main Street in Clarence, which Clarence is an extremely old town. I think 210 years old right now. And our Main Street was one of the very first areas to be developed. And it's old and it's threadbare at this point, but it also recognizes that a lot of the parcels were subdivided at a time when people got around on foot and on horseback. And so they're not a large frontage parcels. And the reason why I bring this up is this, is that those parcels on Main Street in Clarence represent really the majority of all the commercial land for development in the town of Clarence that funds the Clarence School District. About 4 or 5 years ago, at the time that we first started this, we ran into a problem with the tax cap and a potential 10% tax rate in the town of Clarence. It was very bitterly divided. And, there were feelings that, we need to save some money, and other few parents felt very strongly that we owed it to the children. The reality is you can't really go up 10%, but at the same time, you can't cut costs forever. And you have to provide over time as costs go up, you have to provide more funding revenue. Now, I can tell you that the real estate developer hat that I wear, our company provides substantial funding to the town of Clarence School District and the town of Clarence, and it's well spent and very well managed at the town level. Our tax bills that come in are literally, like, we walk down like we did this week, about 2 inches thick of paper. Now, I'm not asking anybody to feel sorry for us. What I'm saying is that we have a role to play as well as developers and it's people funding the community. And so what I think is important to realize, and I've heard it in other areas with the DEC mentioned, but all these things tie together. In the town of Clarence on Main Street, we have no sewers. And that's something that we'd like to see corrected. We have now a great plan called Vision Main Street that was the result of 5 years of work. And we have an economic study that validates that plan that says this plan will work if you have sewers. Unfortunately, those sewers are not there right now. And when we build things, everything that we build is on septic. So when we're sitting down taking a look at our risk and what our opportunity is and what we have to overcome in order to bring a project, there's a few things to consider. One of those is density. We can't maximize the density and be good stewards of the land and make sure that we're using as little of it as possible and preserving those open spaces for future generations to decide what the best use is for when we're constrained by building infrastructure in order to treat wastewater on site. And when we're constrained by increasing restrictions from the DEC every single time. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that the DEC is wrong for trying to have pure water. I know that they mean really well, and these are really smart people who have gone to school for this thing. They really care about what they're doing. That being said, there's some economic realities that happen too, and some of those things come right back to the state level. And in the town of Clarence, for example, those areas that are sewered are actually, those flows go to a plant that's located in the town of Amherst that was built to take flows from the town of Clarence as well as the town of Amherst. However, it requires construction outside of the town of Clarence in order to be able to take those flows. And it's because of the unique nature of Main Street's escarpment, there's a lot of rock. It's right at the surface. And the cost per mile is more than private investment can handle. It's more than the town by itself can handle within the constraints of its borrowing ability and its own tax cap responsibilities. So what I will do is give you an example of a project that we built that was approved that was kind of the model of what we want to do for mixed-use development. It went in the quarter Main and Goodrich in the town of Clarence. Ray, I know that you know where that is back from when you were representatives of the county, and Mike Norris hears me say sewers, sewers, sewers every time I see him for a reason, which is we really need this infrastructure to be there. It used to be we could build up to 10 feet from the property line with sewer infrastructure. Now, when we're building on-site sewer treatment, we have to be 150 feet in all directions off a property line. And coming back to why I said it was so important with Main Street is the parcels are small. So if you have 300 feet of frontage and you have to be 150 feet off the property line in any direction, that means your on-site treatment system can be 0 feet wide. You can't build that parcel. The vast majority of these parcels are sized so that they're at or below that amount of frontage. You can only assemble so much at some time, and then you're not really developing wisely because you're building with a smaller number of units per acre. We have a project that we're building right now right across from the high school in the town of Clarence. We're building about half the number of residential units that we could build and a lot less commercial than we could build on that piece. And what that would allow us to do then would be to take other land elsewhere in the town of Clarence that has been open for generations and allow that to remain open. And when you're expanding things out, when you're putting remedies together that say, okay, for example, we're going to expand the amount of frontage that we have so that we can meet the state requirements, and now a building lot is going to have 150 feet of frontage instead of 100, even for residential. What that does to Jamie is now he's plowing 50% more road. The water infrastructure is 50% longer. All the utilities are 50% longer to serve the same number of people. And that does a few different things that are all counterproductive to building a good community. It makes the cost of the homes 50% more because now the building lots cost 50% more, which prices out larger segments of our children from living within the town of Clarence. So now you have that gap between 25 and 45, which means you don't have young families with children. They have to move away. They take that great education, that work ethic that their parents taught them, and they have to move to another community and might come back when they're advanced in their 40s, which means now they're not going through the entire school district cycle. They're maybe they're relocating back in upper middle school and high school years. So all these things are important. All these things are a state component. a lot of it is driven by well-meaning people at the DEC, but there should also be a countervailing imperative for the state. And I know it was said earlier, and I think, Mike, it might have been you that said at the very beginning, you know, long before you get in your car and you drive to work and you drive over the bridge and you drive over the roads, you get up in the morning and the first thing you're doing probably is flushing the toilet. And that's something that we need as well. And I appreciate all the highway superintendents here. I know how hard you work. I've had dealings with Pat. I've had dealings with Jamie. And I know a lot of great work gets done. I can't say that we have 200 miles of road. I can tell you we have 8 miles of private road that we maintain. I know how hard it is to do that. So I have an appreciation for what everybody else is saying, but infrastructure should just not mean roads and bridges. It should also mean basic, what I think is a basic service in 2018 should be to have sewers in developed areas. And Ray, as you point out, some areas of Clarence are very rural, but Clarence is a very large town. Some areas of it are very suburban. We have traffic jams of our own, and we have, you know, a lot of the same problems that Amherst does in some areas. But one of the things that we lack right now and need very desperately, and I hope that the state, when you're talking about what critical infrastructure is, takes into account that there is a need for sewer in this town as well. And ultimately, what that means is when our commercial development goes in, it takes the burden off of the homeowner, and it allows more taxable base of revenue that means that the school district can grow that budget without having to come up against the tax cap and having to make hard choices that limit what children can do. A lot of people look at it and say, well, you know, Clarence is a very affluent area, and in some parts of it they are. But other parts of the town that are within the school district are just regular people that are getting by, and many of which are now older. They've raised their kids on their watch. They were the volunteer firemen. They were the Little League coach. Now they get a home they maybe bought for $60,000, $70,000 that the land's gone up to like $200,000, $250,000 worth of value, but they don't have that money. And they're getting by on $1,500, $2,000 a month of Social Security income, and they might have a small mortgage, and they have medical costs and things like that. And so just burdening the homeowners alone, because some other more affluent people can say, well, you know, it's one less night out a month, isn't the answer either. So there really is a whole circle of life thing here that comes together that, ironically, is driven by access to the public infrastructure, sewers. And I hope that if you take one thing back, I happen to be sitting here at the end of the table. I mean, all these highway guys do great work. Please don't take any money from them, but please also understand that sewers are every bit as important in our communities, and in some cases really will help limit the amount of road that you need to service people, will help preserve open spaces for the future and for other generations where we're not handcuffing people 100 years from now based on the decisions that we made. Thanks.
Tim, I know you guys brought up the water and sewer issue at the end. I know it wasn't discussed so much in the beginning of the meeting, but
I do want to let you know that that's a major part of our task force. It's come up in previous meetings as well, previous forums. I know this year the state made a significant investment as part of the budget, $2.5 billion water and sewer infrastructure fund. Hopefully that money is getting out the door to those communities that need to get it out to. But we understand, I think the highway guys can appreciate it as well. I mean, it's great to have a nice road, but if you have a water main break or a sewer pipe and you have to tear up that road to fix that pipe, it's like you're throwing bad money after good, or however you want to phrase it. But that's the problem I know that they're very cognizant of. They don't want to face. I know I live in the city of Corning, water main break. There was a big hole right in the middle of the road shooting up, and they had to go back and fix their road. So that's a major part of it. At one point, another issue that's come up in the past, an idea that's come up, I know we talked about a CHIPS-like formula for culverts, but there is legislation that's been proposed in Albany to create almost a similar type of formula for water and sewer infrastructure to give right to the municipalities to deal with. I think the question is how you would measure that. You know, like when we were talking about culverts, it might be a little bit easier to measure because you have a number, each municipality has a certain number of culverts, a certain size. You could maybe be able to quantify that. Water and sewer, I think, with the legislation, with the colleagues who we've been working with, trying to figure out how you quantify that and put that into a formula. But the goal behind it is, let's get the money right to the municipalities. So even if they have to roll it over for a year or couple to work on a project, then they have it, and they can bank it. And then if they need to do a project, it's there for them to fix their water and sewer, whether they're creating a water and sewer system for an area that's being looked at, or whether they're doing major work to repair stuff. So that's something that's being looked at, and I'm wondering, is that something you guys would really look upon favorably, if there's a CHIPS-like formula for water and sewer infrastructure as well?
Oh, yeah. Especially water. It seems it should go hand in hand. When they're fixing a road, they fix a culvert, they fix while they're there. We had the recent sidewalk done in Holland, going down the hill. They did the road work, and they did the sidewalk work, and then they said, oh, well, we just came across the one part where we got to dig all that back up again because the gas and the water and all that was messed up. It's all just seems, if you listen to these guys and let them work with one another, they can do it all at the same time right the first time, and not handcuff them with all these red tape things, 3 pages to 23.
You just can't afford it. It's not that kind of money there.
And that's the thing. All these guys say they can't afford to do the job right the way they want to do it and get all the jobs done. This is core fundamental stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, driving to work, rescuing somebody that's going into distress. We go over bridges where we have to literally slow down because we got someone in the back of the rig years ago. We got roads where we go up into the hills where we're looking at where they've collapsed and they don't have the money to fix it right and just keep putting tire on it. Well, when a corner of a road goes out, is it going to take someone to die like on the Skidjacko to get this preventive maintenance done rather than reactive?
Well, I can tell you when I was the mayor, we had enough, we had one of the highest water sewer rates combined in the state. And I did and nobody had wanted, again, it's one of those issues, it costs a lot of money to fix your infrastructure. So we did a study, and we were at, I think, at one point, 68% water loss. So the water comes in from Erie County, and then 68% of it goes right into the ground because we had it was such old infrastructure. And we started tightening that up, and we actually spent, it had to be a couple million just to start moving it. And then when we did our Main Street, but we identified all those spots, and we said it was going to cost some money. And we ended up getting it down to about 6%. It took about 4 years, but the money isn't there, and a lot of municipalities can't afford that. So as you know, it comes to our East Aurora was, you had 100-year-old water lines, and to go and try and dig them up and replace them. So I understand, but that's got to be something that if you do have some sort of a formula, every community would love it. I mean, they need it. Is the money there in New York State? I don't know under this climate right now, but we definitely, that's something everyone could use.
Even the $2.5 billion for the Water and Sewer Infrastructure Fund, it's just a drop in the bucket for the tremendous need that's out there. I know some estimates I've seen $100 billion or more.
Yeah.
So, one suggestion that came up at one of our downstate down in Long Island, saying that they think now might be the time. I don't know, I'm just throwing out, what do you guys think? Now might be the time to consider like a bond act type of thing, where it goes to the voters to approve it or shoot it down, but it's up to the voters to decide. They said that's something that people might look favorable on if you have laid out, if it's a transportation bond, like what the money is being spent on, or if it's a water and sewer type of thing, what the money is being spent on. But you got to remember, that's borrowed money. That's more debt. But that's a big problem. But the question is, if it's the voters something would approve of, whether they have that question. I mean, the reason I just bring it up is just because it was brought up at one of the meetings down in Long Island. So, but there's definitely a need out there. But it's definitely a challenge for these local municipalities and anyone to make that type of investment if the state's not helping. But the state can't write check for everything. In that instance, we need help on the federal side as well.
Where you raise more taxes, I'd like to see where the money is going, because I hear these guys wondering also how come they're not getting certain budget, allocations. And Eastern New York, I hear about Eastern New York getting more than Western New York. And before, I'm just speaking as a conservative taxpayer, where you raise taxes and take out bonds and take out loans, I want to know where the other money is going and why isn't it going toward the core essentials?
That's a good point. But like I said, budgeting is all about priorities, and what are your priorities, and you run into challenges, whether you're talking about infrastructure funding, when you're talking about education funding, you have those interests in, it's parochial, it's downstate, upstate, and those are the battles. Well, even when we did the capital plan a couple of years ago, we had to fight tooth and nail to get a 5-year capital plan for roads and bridges, for DOT, to have parity with the MTA capital plan for downstate. I mean, we understood that the need for, the need for the MTA capital plan, it's important for them down there. But, the roads and bridges are just as equally important. It's the lifeblood of our transportation system up here, just like it is for down there. But we had to fight tooth and nail to finally get the legislature and the governor to make sure there's parity in that type of, that's the battle we're going to be having in another year or two as well. Because that was the first time we had parity in, I think, over 10 years, because in 2010 they didn't do it. So that's the battle we all have.
One of these projects that these guys talk about will swallow half to 3/4 of their whole budget for the year. How do you operate as a business or even a department when a major project like that is going to just demolish your budget? I mean, that's where the state has to say, New York City's got the funds, New York City's got this. The big towns and cities, they got it, but the small towns like Holland, they're sitting there trying to, and I heard this from a recently deceased long-term superintendent. He was complaining about how they wanted the town to take over county roads, or the county to take over this road, and bouncing between who's going to take it because we don't have money. Where's my state tax dollar going? I want to know that it's going toward safety, transportation, fundamental water and gas to live. I don't want to hear it's going, sorry, other countries are here or there or any other thing. Gap elimination adjustment to get our roads back in shape. Do that, Cornwall.
I've talked about parity many times. Upstate would love parity.
Yeah.
We don't see it nowhere near what it should be. And I know you guys fight tooth and nail for it. We're not even on the same page as major cities, downstate.
Same with the schools. I hear the schools, when they get their budgeting in East and Western New York, nowhere near what they get in the money out there. I'm like, you know what? Don't give $1 billion to your buddies and say that you're giving Western New York money.
What would be the best place in Albany to address concerns when any bureaucratic agency, state-run agency, is actually interfering with local government? To the Senate or the Assembly group that oversees it? I mean, these gentlemen talk about DEC. I would talk about another state agency that you cannot challenge them. Once you challenge them, they will nitpick and run you into the ground or find other things to criticize you for. So it's almost like the bureaucratic agencies are New York State examples of the big bullies, right? In the smallest towns where the smaller governments pay the most because New York City passes regulations that exempt New York City, but the rest of the state, I mean, the state passes them, but with New York City's vote, and then I'll talk in corrections, exempting New York City prisons, but every other prison must abide by this, except the state prisons and the New York City prisons. And they are bureaucratic nonsense, just like keeping too much asphalt, right? It's like saying you can't recycle too much, right? Or you can recycle too much. Right. Where would you address something? Attorney General, or it's hopeless? And it's not fair. But
I would say my recommendation is if you were run into a bureaucratic problem with a state agency, certainly let your state elected officials know, because I mean we get calls, we try to deal. We can't always solve it, but we don't mind shaking the tree because that's our job. But then you also direct that to the commissioners of the agencies. If it's someone with DC, write to the commissioner. But I would definitely include your state legislators in on that.
You probably wouldn't have time for it, but it's almost like, wow, could you do assembly hearings on that? That we want to hear input from all local government about any state agency which is making the cost of local government more expensive.
I mean, ultimately, the agencies are accountable to the executive, right?
Well, it's supposed to be the other way around, I think, right? The local government's supposed to be watching bigger government, but it's not the way it's turned out.
DEC is accountable to the governor, so the governor sets the tone for the rest of the bureaucratic agencies, right? We can pass a law that can restrain an agency or expand its powers, But we can't tell the agency what to do as long as they're acting within the law. And, you know, the governor can tell the agency what laws he wants them to enforce and what laws he wants them to, you know, maybe not enforce at this time. But ultimately, the governor, the agencies are accountable to the governor. The bureaucracy is accountable to the governor. The only thing that we can do is possibly change a law. So if a law says you can't go into Tonawanda Creek and move a tree, then we can change that. But probably the law doesn't say that. Probably the law says something very broad, and then the agencies come in and make their own rules based on what, you know, based on the tone that's set by the governor.
It's exactly what we face, is the laws are very broad and in general.
Which they should be.
As they should be, but then the administration makes policy which runs rampant, and it's.
Well, I think we were excited to hear about a fiscal impact statement that must accompany all new legislation. But then we hear it only means the fiscal impact to the state. It has nothing to do with the fiscal impact. I mean, that might be an easy one to fix. The fiscal impact statements must include cost to local government, not just the state government.
And in fact, we have a bill that does just that.
You can't get it signed.
Pass through the assembly.
Well, and then I was president of my school board and tax cap, and then they throw these unfunded mandates.
Yep.
And us, a little school district, we're crushed by something that comes out of the state ed department when we have no control on it, so.
So, Ray, I had spoke to Mike about this, and it'd be something I'd like to see our highway superintendents get together and have you guys pass something that when it comes to our drainage and the drainage of property in our roads, that we have the right to go through these wetland regulated areas without.
Ooh, there's a good one.
Sure.
And so we need to find out the wording and find out what we need to do to pass that legislation, so that our hands aren't so tied going through these areas.
I wouldn't be surprised if you see that in our report. Right, Phil? Right, Phil?
Right,
The
Phil?
wetlands,
Thanks, Phil.
wetlands act.
Like 70% wetlands.
Let me see, would you say,
That's
I don't
federal.
want to get, not being political, but would you say in the last, say, 6 years that the DEC has been overstepping their boundaries, has taken on more?
They're the Chipotle at the poker table, let me tell you that, right now.
Yeah.
They are the
They've
Chipotle.
increased their threshold in the last year or two from working within, we used to be able to work within 100 feet, now it's like 500 feet. Which pulled a couple of our jobs in our town to a halt till we got permitted. They only permit certain times of the year. Very difficult agency to work with.
Yeah, the
The
checks
better
are-
answer to that question, though, might be who is from Tonawanda, and are the people of Tonawanda, is everybody happy about the closing of Tonawanda Coke? That was all DEC, right?
Mhm.
So I can't imagine everybody's happy about that.
Well, yeah.
Tim, you got a point?
So one more business is
I
dead.
just wanted to pick up on what Sheriff was talking about, as well as State Representative was talking about. I think what they were talking about was the rollout of the Part 360 regulations that started to become more related to more things. And the environmental conservation law allows the DEC to develop a code of state regulations, right? You guys passed the law.
Right.
And then in order for them to change the code, they can do that, but they have to go through a public process. I think what happened with the Part 360 regulation rollout, it seemed to always, all of a sudden just happen. And I don't believe that the public hearing process was effective. And when I heard about it, I was at an environmental professionals meeting, and the DEC people were quite expert on it, and they were talking to environmental professionals. All of a sudden, people that have roads to deal with heard about this sort of as a surprise. So I guess I hear what you're saying about the governor and the executive and all that stuff, but it seems to me there's some nuance that could be improved where the DEC could be asked to do a better job of making making public hearings more effective. Certainly working within the law and changing the code to make it more updated, but to hear people before they change the code to see what the impacts are, so they're not surprising people that have to deal with it later.
As a matter of fact, there were hearings, and we attended those hearings and showed them where there were problems with the rule. And they went ahead and they
instituted it anyway, knowing it was incorrect, and they sent us a letter, thanks for your input, but we're not making any changes. And the rule was bad to begin with.
We've
So
got the
that's
same letters.
arrogance of a state agency.
When we want your input, we'll ask for it.
Or if your
and
input
then we'll-
matches
and
ours,
then
we'll take
ignore
it
it.
into consideration.
Do the bully at the top.
You tell us how long the leash could be on a drug dog in the jail. Like, really? Why would the state be involved in telling you how long the leash has to be on a drug dog in the jail?
Well, the DEC has been running roughshod for a number of years, and it's gotten worse. So I said that tongue in cheek to put it out there, but we all know that DEC DEC doesn't listen anymore because they've got, I think they have, wherever they take their direction from is from New York City. It's not from up here. So the DEC has become a rogue agency. It really has not listening to the people anymore. It's doing what they want. I hear it from the agriculture community in my district all the time about some of the things they do. And that's what we have to deal with. And I know you got 5 people up here who are trying to help you.
Tax that manure.
Right. Oh, everything. It's crazy. So, we need help with that fight. That's something we need help.
Is there anything we can do to help you guys? I'm sure I've talked about a little bit, but is highway superintendents, citizens, anything we can do? We talked about when we go to Albany, we meet with you guys and you guys hear us. Mm-hmm. I've joked when we're out in the hallways, let's knock on the door of the guy down in New York City and make him listen to us. If things like that would help, or any other way we could help.
I think when you guys come to Albany, it's very effective. You can not just do it, that one day too, but as your association lobbies on issues. I mean, I think that's important. You guys have your associations. You guys all do. I mean, I think that's very important that those your voices are heard in that way.
It's not always.
It's got to be an easier way than them to travel all the way to Holland or to Albany, though. I mean,
When they like to go.
Who do you communicate?
Don't let them kid you. They like to go.
Yeah, but that one guy's sitting there telling me how he's helping out another department and he's doing amazing shared services, but when he's gone all the way to Albany, he can't do that. He's got a small department. You should be able to go to a governmental agency or a representative and say, here it is, And day after, we can't be there every day.
And a lot of times, like one of the things I talked about a couple of years ago was, we're always, when we had the extreme weather, maybe it was 3 years ago, it was the CHIPS funding. We're always struggling to get maybe another $5 million into it, right? Which is nothing. When the governor wanted another $1 billion for the Tappan Zee Bridge, it was like that. Okay, now you know what $1 billion would do for us, for the whole rest of the state? So I've always proposed that we go put in a bill, because it gets bipartisan support. Everyone on both sides of the aisle have DPW heads, and they know what's going on in these communities. And we get a lot of this is bipartisan. So I would like to see us go in one year and just, we want to triple the funding on CHIPS. I put in a bill, tongue in cheek, last year to make CHIPS $1 billion. And I got laughed at. But I did it to make a point. Our infrastructure was crumbling, and we need to do something. And maybe we go in and say, enough of this 2% increase, or we did get some more money last year and the year before. We're getting the drop in the bucket. We're not getting, we're always taking the crumbs and saying thank you so much, okay? While other parts of the state are getting the Willy Wonka bar. Okay, and we're getting the crumb, and that's just, but that's what we deal with, and it just gets old after a while. I mean, on something like this, I think we need to fight and say, you know what, we want a bigger piece of the pie, and we want it now.
I mean, there's incredible, when we do the campaign every year, we do the letter to the governor and legislative leaders, we get incredible support. We get, like last year, we had 142 legislators sign the letter. Mm-hmm. That's over, 60% of our body. 64 Assembly Democrats signed the letter. I mean, we had over 104 members in the Assembly. So, I mean, there's bipartisan support for this. Why the governor doesn't, I remember sitting down with the governor's head of transportation, why he doesn't move by along with this, because all he was all he wanted to do was just restore the $65 million in winter recovery money that he cut in his budget proposal. That was part of last year's. So just to get you back to the level where you were, which is ridiculous. But there is incredible support, even from downstate. We have a lot of members from the city that signed on the letter. We've talked to them over the years. We've educated them. You benefit from this money as well. You have local roads in the city that you need to take care of. This is a benefit to you as well. So we get that support. It's just a matter of getting the governor to go along with it, because obviously there's a tremendous amount of executive power the governor has, and he uses it for whatever he wants to use it for. If it's important to him, he'll do it. I mean,
Start road tax for whatever you want. It was supposed to go for highway improvements.
that's right.
This is not his priority, and we've known that.
Well, I think we want to be respectful of everybody's time. We're about 15 minutes over. Phil, you want
Yep. We just let our colleagues here close it up. I just wanted to, before I leave, thank you for your hospitality. Thanks for being here. Believe me, your input is critically important to what we're trying to do here. And when we're finished, we got 2 more hearings to do, forums to do. We're going to be putting the report together. We're going to, have it there available to share, but we are going to share it with the governor and legislative leaders, and hopefully have some solid recommendations, common sense recommendations that we need to do. And this is a critical issue that needs to be addressed. And like I said, it shouldn't be a Republican or Democratic issue. This is a common sense issue. So, thank you again for your hospitality. Thanks for taking the time to come out here and share with us your expertise and your ideas. It means a lot. So thank you again.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.